Transportation Committee meeting for October 27th. And looking at the agenda, is there anything on the agenda that we would like changed or added? Any amendments to the agenda?
None here.
Okay. Okay, if we have time at the end, I will talk a little bit about some other funding things. In the meantime, our first agenda item is updates on the Bay Street pedestrian path. Is that you, Mark, or is that someone else?
I was eating. Run that by me again.
Okay, our first agenda item is an update on the Bay Street pathway.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, nothing's changed since the last update we provided at the council meeting. We have completed our end date extension, which takes us to 2027. And we've completed our NEPA update. And we've re-engaged with our right-of-way agent. And
You
we've
said 2027?
Yeah, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, there's different dates when you federalize a project. So for example, when you obligate design funds, you have 10 years to complete the project. And that's the end date, that 2027. The original end date for this project was 2021 or something. It was an odd end date. And so it took about a year, but a year and a half ago, I started the process of going through the process to change the end date. That's when you have to be completely closed out, all the work, everything. And it's a date that FHWA establishes is you need to be just wrapped up with the project. So I knew that the date we had in there, we wanted to extend it out just to be on the safe side. And like I said, it took over a year and a half to get that end date approved. But officially, the Bay Street pedestrian pathway now has an end date with FHWA to 2027.
What's our projected end date?
Our projected end date is 2024, 2025.
Let me explain the funding a little bit, Scott. We got some original money, about 300,000, and those were federal dollars. And that kind of started our clock. And then we got another award of federal dollars for right-of-way acquisition. And that's the money that Mark is using now for the work we're doing. The other monies, the original 300 included other parts of the path. And then we received, I think it was a little over 2 million in the Connecting Washington package for construction. And that 3 million.
3.5.
3.5 for construction. And I believe we're slated to receive those monies in 2022. That's
Right.
when we have access to them. We don't have access before that.
Right. We originally had access, remember, out of the 3.5 million, we took 500 to build segment 3. So we obligated the remaining 3 million we originally had access to in the 1921 biennium. And we moved that out into the next biennium. And so I've been working with WashDOT to continue to move that into the right biennial budgets, because it's a cash flow for them, because that money doesn't really exist. They
Right.
collect it as they go. So that's an active process to keep that. When we did the NEPA update and the end date update this last year, I've programmed that $3 million out into the 2022, 2023, and 2024 time periods for now. It's not set in stone. And the date that we have that's you have 10 years from the date of obligation of the right-of-way phase to obligate the construction phase. That current date is June of 2023. So we have the ability to move that date out. If we get hung up in any sort of delays in the right-of-way phase, we have the ability to move that out as well. But for now, our current construction obligation date for that 3 million is June of 2023. And we are hoping to be achieving that in March of 2022. If not, if we get delayed, we have the ability to extend that out.
So I guess the summary of the Bay Street pedestrian path is our right-of-way agent is back at work.
They're back at work, and we had our, what's the name? The,
Environmental justice.
no, we did all that with the NEPA. Our public information officer, we spent a lot of time last month getting information out that we were restarting the project.
Oh, right,
I don't know, I'm having a blank on his title.
right.
It's the, what is it? Not public information, is our person that we're doing our notifications and public notices and stuff through. So we had a robust city project information piece that went out, as well as a Bay Street specific piece that went out.
So, okay. So that catches us all up. Jay, did you have a question? If you unmute yourself, we could hear you.
All right, thank you. I didn't hear anybody say we were recording, so did we catch that?
Yeah, we've been
There's a
recording.
button up and I can see a button.
Yep, left corner, red button.
We've been recording, yeah.
Okay. Our next agenda item I'm excited about, and I think this is Chris, we're going to talk about pavement preservation.
Yeah, Jackie, could you put up the exhibit for the 3 pillars of pavement preservation mind map?
Yes, I'd be happy to. How did you, I've got a mind map. Is that the one?
That's the one, yeah.
Okay.
So what you're going to look at initially here is a mind map of our proposed strategy for how we address pavement preservation in the city. So we have different components of this. So we have the work that operation and maintenance does. The other circle you'll see is the contracted work that we would do hopefully on an annual basis ongoing. And then we don't want to forget about our transportation improvement projects, because a lot of those projects along our arterial corridors and within our neighborhoods and centers will also upgrade the streets. And for a lot of cities, that's a pretty important element, because most of the major projects are done with grant money. And that's how we can get a lot of the preservation done in the city as well.
Can I
So-
ask, Dr., you've got on the top, by your top circle,
Mhm.
got 1.45 million per year in 2016. Is that what our consultant told us?
Correct. Back in 2016, that was our pavement management system, the work that was done then.
And we needed to invest basically in $1.5 million a year to bring it, for how many, did you remember how many years that was?
Perpetuity.
That's ongoing.
Oh, okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And that sounds a little daunting, but I haven't worked in in my last city, we actually had a target like that, and then we were able to actually raise our pavement condition index with less money
Okay.
through a combination of these kind of things. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that, but that's a good point. That's what the study said back in 2016. So we get there with the trying to get to that goal. We have these compilation of things, and so the activities would be, O&M. They would fill the potholes hopefully like 4 times a year. Get around doing that. I'd like to see them do some aggressive crack sealing, because we have a lot of our streets are in relatively good condition. We want to keep them that way. That's the cheapest thing we can do. So if we can stay on the crack sealing and get ahead of that, that will be very beneficial from a cost standpoint for us. And then we want to supplement their work by contracting out pavement repair on our streets, this is where we'll do, address the patching with, in the rough areas of the street with the mill and fills, perhaps some overlays and in some areas, chip seals. We can evaluate those as a cheaper alternative overlay.
Can
depending-
you explain to me what those different things are? I get filling potholes.
Mhm.
Is crack sealing where you see, tell me what that is. If you could explain that, Chris?
Yeah, so what you do is you use compressed air to clean, you clean up the cracks that you see in the streets. And then you fill them with asphalt emulsion and an aggregate. And that seals the cracks and keeps the water from getting underneath the roadway and causing other more expensive problems to fix.
Okay, and it keeps water from going in and freezing and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, freeze thaw is probably one of the more damaging things.
Okay,
Yeah, keeping the water out of the subgrade is really important for potholes and alligatoring and all sorts of failures that aren't based on the asphalt necessarily failing, they're based on the subgrade failing.
thank you.
And Chris, do I understand that in terms of the O&M work orders, we're budgeting 50,000 a year for materials and personnel? It seems light, that number, for both materials as well as personnel.
Yeah, that's what I had written down. I'm not sure if that may have just been for materials. Noah, do you?
Yeah, that was just for the asphalt, just for the materials.
That makes more sense.
So what we're looking at is we're hoping to get, 2 or 3 weeks of our crews put together to do that kind of work ongoing and as we go forward. And then we listed the equipment items that you'll find in the budget that are needed for them to do the type of work we need them to do efficiently. And we don't have the right crack sealing equipment. So if we're going to get aggressive with that, we're going to need better equipment for that.
Did
And
you
then-
also want to explain or Beck, did you want to hear a mill and fill and overlay?
But
and
yeah, I kind of, because people use these terms and Chris, I really don't know what they are. And I just kind of want to have
Yeah.
in my mind what they are.
So typically when we get our streets repaired and we contract it out, the major paving contractors have really expensive equipment that grinds the asphalt.
Okay,
And so that's just a faster way to do it. So they'll usually go down a street and we'll, there'll be sections of the street that we tear up and totally replace. There'll be others where we just have a few patched areas where we hit those and we grind the asphalt out, and then they come in and lay new asphalt. So
I
it's
think,
the way we repair the asphalt surfacing.
so
okay,
Beck, I think the best visual example is when we did the Bethel corridor to get 20 years out of that road, when we inherited from the county, it was in really poor condition. So we went through in advance and we did mill and fill work where we went through, we dug out certain areas where we knew the subgrade was bad. We made those repairs and we filled it. And then in the main intersection of Bethel and Lund, we actually did a mill and fill with an overlay. And then outside of Bethel, we just mill and fill. So if you drive south towards Fred Meyer, you'll see areas where we just, now you've got like these rectangles where we just did a mill and fill with a patch,
Okay.
which is different than the mill and fill that we did as a mill and fill and overlay at Bethel Lund. And we did a complete overlay and mill and fill then all the way to the county line by the county park to the east. And then we went all the way to the bridge to the west.
right.
So that big cross was a mill and fill with overlay. Everything north and south of that, we just did a mill and fill.
What's the difference between a chip sealing and a crack sealing?
Chip sealing is an inexpensive road surface where you basically, it's pea gravel and oil, pea gravel and tar.
Okay,
It's mainly used in rural applications. I know that Tacoma and City of Olympia recently embarked on kind of more residential program, but that's where you go in, you prep the road, but instead of putting asphalt on top, you're basically doing tar and pea gravel as your road surface. But I know on the road I live on, the county redoes my road every 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
So Mark, what's the logic in those other jurisdictions going with chip sealing in higher traffic areas in the urban residential areas?
I think the logic was they were trying it to see, because nobody really wants to federalize maintenance dollars, preservation dollars, except for like a county, like Mason County or Kitsap County has miles and miles and miles of county roads that they can chip seal. Then it's worth them managing federal dollars. But because there were preservation dollars out there, only the counties were really going after them. And that's what I witnessed at KRCC. So, and that's still kind of how it operates over there. I think Tacoma and the city of Olympia were doing it really as a trial, because I remember watching something on the news where they were really doing it in neighborhoods to see how it held up, how the neighborhood, how they reacted to this surface, because it takes weeks for the chip seal to actually cure, and you end up with, because it's being compacted by the cars driving on it, and then you end up with all this extra pea gravel that rolls off. So it's not something you want to skateboard on. So I haven't heard any results back on how these more urbanized applications of chip seal have fared. I just know that it's a divergence from the normal urban standard, because you certainly wouldn't do chip seal with curb, gutter, and sidewalk.
So yeah, the real advantage is from a cost standpoint. So I'm thinking that with some of our local access roads that are in older neighborhoods that don't have curb gutter and curb and gutter, that we could use that, we could apply chip seal rather than an overlay to rehabilitate those roadways. And the big savings is with an overlay, every crack comes through. So you have to do a lot of the mill and fill first. A lot of the prep work is more expensive. So where the real savings in chip seal is that people don't think about is the chip seal will bridge a lot of the minor cracking. And I had collector and arterial roads on Bainbridge that would go 12 years or more, even with truck traffic, some truck traffic on them. And if we did the right prep work, the right crack sealing ahead of time, and we're careful how we manage it. Sometimes we did a double shot of chip seal. We had pretty good performance with them and longevity. So it's a cost savings measure that we could deploy in some areas. There aren't as many opportunities here, obviously, as there were on Bainbridge Island, because Bainbridge Island had a lot of rural roads. But it's something we would consider to stretch our dollars.
And it's just something that we may decide that there's enough preservation dollars in a future cycle, and we get this program kind of rolling, that it'll be worth federalizing and going through all the hoops to manage those dollars.
I appreciate your time explaining all that. I do. I feel like I know more about what we're talking. I don't have to guess. So Chris, if you want to finish.
Yeah, so, and then, currently our current recommendation had been about 150 a year, given the budgetary constraints to get started and be able to contract out some pavement repair work in the city. Fortunately, it looks like we're going to get more than that and get really going on that. My target, just to get going with this and see how we do over a few years, would be about $400,000 a year. I think we can get a lot done based on what I'm seeing and the need is out there. That's a good number to target on an annual basis. And then the other section in red there, as we complete these CIP projects, that takes big bites out of this as we upgrade our arterial and collector streets and even some of the local streets potentially. When we do complete rehabilitation of the streets where they get all new asphalt, new base, and that addresses the pavement repair, the pavement preservation as well, and extends the life of the pavement for many years. So that's kind of the vision, the 3 pillars of pavement preservation.
Okay. Were you going to talk about, I see on the agenda, we have a needs assessment and project ideas.
Yeah, so Jackie, if you would, that's the next slide. I forget what I called that, like pavement repair strategy, or not that one. Pavement implementation, excuse me. There we go. So what I've done is I've gone through our pavement management system, the condition assessment from back in 2016.
Okay.
And I've looked at all the arterial streets that are in fair to fail condition because we want to keep those in better condition because they break down the fastest. Then I've looked at the collector streets that are in marginal to failed condition, and then all the local access streets that are in very poor to failed condition, and developed a list. So these are the streets that I think we should be looking at over the next 4 to 6 years to do pavement repair. And then I've broken it down into two kind of additional categories. I've got CIP projects listed. So you can see a fair number of these roads, at least for the arterial streets and the collector streets, would be addressed if we did capital improvement projects in those areas. Give you a sense of what I was talking about with the mind map and the circles.
Right.
So the fortunate thing is it's not, we don't have a huge backlog of streets that are in need of immediate attention. So that's why I feel like what's been proposed there, this combination of the three pillars, the way it's presented would be adequate going forward to address these and future roadways.
Chris, I'm remembering when we saw the presentation for the pavement management system. I'm remembering that the gentleman who gave the presentation indicated that we did not necessarily want to do the streets in the worst condition first.
Correct.
He indicated
Yeah,
that
the worst first is a poor strategy because then you have roads that you could have maintained in good condition and keep them in good condition at little cost, deteriorate into worse condition and become more expensive to construct. So
right.
We don't want to get ourselves in that situation. So
right.
what I basically do is prioritize from the top down on the list as to where the dollars go. We want to keep the arterials in the best shape, and then the collectors, and then at the bottom get to whatever local access streets we can get to. And the local access streets, I mean, if we have operation and maintenance going around filling potholes, I mean, we can get by for a very long time with that. They don't tend to break down as fast. So may not look that great, but at least they're passable, and cars generally aren't going so fast on those streets. So wear and tear in vehicles and that kind of thing isn't as big an issue. A lot of cities, major cities like Seattle, Tacoma, those kind of places, they've struggled to even get out and address the local access street in any kind of meaningful way. Okay, so and then so where do we go from here? I've got some thoughts on what things would look like in the next 2 years. I can just dictate that if you don't have any other questions about the list here.
Do you guys have questions about the list? I want to talk about money just for a minute before you start your, but Jay, I can't see Jay. Jay or Scott, do you have any questions on this list?
Have any questions at this moment?
Okay.
No, money is the big topic.
Okay, I'll give you just what happened at the last time the finance committee met. And Nick is here, okay. Nick had done revenue projections, and he based them off of the budgeted amount, the sales tax budget amount that we did with our last biennial budget. And as we know, we've come in, our sales tax revenue has exceeded that. And so there was a question by the finance committee is I personally was not comfortable basing our budget on actual revenues. That because of what we're going through right now with COVID, I don't know that if those are going to be sustainable. But the finance committee had talked about increasing both years of our biennial budget by 150,000 to have that 300,000 exclusively going into our streets. So all of the numbers that you've looked at with the budget right now, I do not believe include that extra $150,000 a year. And then the other
So
money,
Beck, I can speak to that. The
okay,
dollars that we've programmed are in the capital program. And then the preservation and maintenance is a bucket, and the bucket had $100,000 in it, which was the initial budget that came out. And no projects have been picked for this bucket. And that's what Chris is kind of talking about at a high level. These are the things he's talking about fixing with this bucket. So we had the initial budget that I brought forward had 100,000. Correct me, Noah, on these
I
numbers.
thought it was 150.
Could be. Well, that was what you guys did. So there was,
No.
there was 100, 150 somewhere in there.
Right.
And then there was money for the asphalt, and
Oh,
then
okay,
there was money there's 100,000 in equipment purchases so that we could perform some of this work. It's sealing equipment and a saw cutting equipment. Then we went into the finance committee's addition, and you guys added another 300,000, 150 each year from the additional revenue that you've identified. And we have tomorrow's deliberations. It is likely that since all of those meetings, we've got the ruling on 976,
Right.
and we have $230,000 to add to this. So you've got 4, 5, 6, 630, roughly 630, 650,000 ish, and
over the biennium.
for the biennium
Yeah.
for this bucket of type work. And then there's capital, which is that's where Chris is going next. And this isn't so much the bucket, getting the dollars in there for this bucket of activity is more important than picking the actual what we're going to pave. That can get figured out in the next 60, 90, 120 days.
Right.
What's important is getting the dollars put into the bucket in this budget process, a pool of dollars, and then getting the right capital projects. So Chris, and which he hasn't spoke to yet, what are the priorities of the capital? And that's where I think what we're looking for some direction from the committee tonight, so that to drive tomorrow's meeting.
And Mayor, if Chris lets me share my screen, I got a nice table that captured everything you said, so it'll make it nice and clear to follow what's happening in the budget process. But no, there we go. Oh, Chris, are you the host?
Jackie.
Yeah, give me a minute. I'm working on it. Hold on.
Thank you, Jackie.
Yes. It's not giving me the,
Nope, you got it.
oh,
You did
okay.
good. You did good. All right, this table I just put together real quick as we're talking because I thought this might come up.
Okay.
But this walks us through exactly what the mayor and Councilmember Ashby were just discussing. In the mayor's budget, we had 100,000 for crack and seal, 300,000 for preservation. Finance committee met and added 300,000 of additional money for pavement preservation to come from sales tax revenue in the general fund. After that, we had a council discussion and we discussed the TBD. And at that council discussion, the council directed to use the $235,000 of fund balance in 2022 towards pavement preservation as well. And so what that gets me to currently is a proposed draft final for our 002 fund of 100,000 for our crack and seal program, $300,000 for pavement preservation in 2021, with $535,000 for pavement preservation in 2022, for a total of $935,000 invested in these two programs. And now this figure does not include the equipment purchases, which I would add on as part of a kind of a presentation type, that the total investment into our crack and seal and pavement preservation program. But this captures real quickly the elements that we've discussed over the last 3 weeks.
So I was light.
A little bit. Yeah.
Right, but that gives the other committee members, Jay, a little background when we continue this discussion. Go ahead, Jay.
So with the mind map though, and our consultant, we're still kind of behind the 8 ball regard funding for this.
Light years were from where we were.
I'm not disagreeing, Mayor. I just wanted to say that, we're still kind of, behind, but it's a start.
Yes. So if we could, Chris, can I continue onward with the budget or you?
Well, no, let Chris, I interrupted Chris because I wanted council to understand a little bit about the money that we had available.
Yeah, hold on a sec. I gotta close my.
And so I guess while Chris is closing the door, I just want to make sure that since this has been brought forth to the Transportation Committee, as we discuss this, I guess this is the question is, does the Transportation Committee support this kind of final draft of the budget? And is that something that the committee is willing to put forward as we kind of continue to massage the transportation budget?
Yes.
I would concur. I just keep wondering how we make up the shortfall.
The golden question.
Yeah, but this is just, we have been putting not, well, what I had read when I said 150, that was mill and fill, and it was for each year. So that's, in my mind, that's, well, that's the 300. I didn't realize we had the 100,000 for crack and seal too. And then
Yeah.
Finance Committee thought that we could come up with 150 each year out of sales tax. I believe the other conversation the Finance Committee had spoke to the fact that we're not going to do all of this work in January. And so we have an opportunity, we can budget it, but we have an opportunity to see how revenue really comes in. Did I capture that right, Noah?
I think that is correct. And part of the discussion was we can throw a lot of money at the problem, but then you're putting Public Works in the position where they have to carry out the kind of workload. And can they, from a human resource standpoint and contracting standpoint, do the work? And so that's where we're kind of turning it over to them to let them kind of figure
Right.
out the plan. And
Okay,
again,
so
I think that, yeah.
So, okay, so yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to what I had outlined in the mind map there as far as the dollars overall. We've got a little bit more in 2022 than we have in 2021, but I think that's really a good start. So we can gauge how we do in the next couple of years and see about our capacity and need, capacity to deliver and the actual need based on what we get accomplished. But going what I'm thinking as far as how we would best spend the money going forward in 2021 and 2022, given the program years that are shown there. Of course, the crack and seal, that's operation and maintenance. So that leaves $300,000 for the contracted work that takes place in 2021. And then the 535, I think it was, remaining for 2022. In 2021, I think we should go ahead and just continue with Lippert or Lippert, the pavement repair and reduce the. We didn't get the money for the sidewalks, unfortunately, but we can still do a few ADA retrofit ramps to meet the requirements there, and that could be done, I believe, for $300,000. So that would be the project for 2021. And city crews, we would focus their effort on the major streets and as many of the local access streets as we can get to with patching. They're not going to get the crack seal equipment till the following year, but we can get a week or two of a couple passes of almost a week's worth of crew focused on fixing some of the streets. In 2022, then we have an opportunity to do a very large citywide patch and overlay project. We would follow through and address Sydney, which has been on the radar for a while. Address any of the other higher volume arterial and collector streets, and then try to, if we have an opportunity, if we don't get caught up on all, if we're able to get caught up on all those needs, then we would also pick off a few of the local access streets. In 2022, also, we might consider including some of the work as a tied project to the Old Clifton non-motorized improvements. If that goes forward by 2020, I'm sorry, not the non-motorized improvements, but the Anderson roundabout. So if that goes forward in 2022, then we could do some of the Old Clifton repairs as part of that project. That's a good way for us to leverage ourselves, and that way, if we're already managing one project, we don't have to have a second project to manage. We just throw it in with the one project we're already managing. And then in 2022, that's when the crews, we would focus on crack sealing of the arterials and collectors, and hope to address as much of that as we can within 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks of their time. So that's the vision I see for the next 2 years.
So I think, Chris, right now what we have in, I'm going back to the budget. I'm going to try to be selfish with my time here because I need some guidance from the committee. Right now we have this proposed for the budget. I'm seeing heads nodding, and yes, the committee is willing to support this overall plan. And Chris, I think we've talked that this sets us up for the dollars amounts to be approved for the kind of 2 different programs. And we can work with the transportation committee over the next couple of months, really ironing out what that program looks like at the street level, kind of more detailing out how you just verbally did as far as the plan of work for 21 and 22. I also wanted to make the comment that although I am putting dollars in 21 and 22, this is a biennial budget. So as we adopt this, I'm focused on the total and from a cash flow perspective, what the dollar is going to be. But over the next couple of months, as this transformation committee with the support from Public Works kind of really iron out what this preservation program looks like for the biennium, the specific streets projects and the plan, those dollars could shift from one fiscal year to the other if they need to. So I don't want to get too mirrored down to the specific dollars, because you can see the approach was, a fairly general split of the dollars, kind of make it even. But as we develop the real project plan, if we need to adjust where those monies are in the fiscal year, we could do that as well.
Chris, you had mentioned, in addition to the, I think it was you, could have been the mayor, in addition to the financial commitment the council needs to make on this, what sort of human resource commitment does Public Works have to commit to step up to this type of preservation or maintenance projects?
So, it's not that big a deal to do the annual contracted pavement repair program. If I do one of those a year, that's not a huge drain on our resources here. Of course, I'm limited to doing, like 2 or 3 of those things a year, because there's, I've got to manage all the projects that are being done by the consultants and then do work on the development side. So that's, only one of a few type of projects like that we can do the design in-house every year. It's going to help if we pick up that other, FTE for the engineering position, then we can share the workload a little bit better. And that would certainly help deliver a broader program.
Yeah, that's a great question. And really the choke point is in the engineering department and in man hours. And we're going to hire the one engineer. And I would, depending on things come along, and what 2022 looks like in the mid-biennium review, that's probably where an additional resources need to be, whether it's support staff or another engineer. I mean, we have a significantly smaller engineering staff than our neighbors do.
Right. The other question I have is, when we get that equipment, and I'm assuming someone's going to tell us what we're going to buy, the operation of that, does that just flow directly into the work program for the crews? Or do we have the people that can, do that work? Because you said they typically go out a couple of weeks a year. Will this be more?
Our new foreman we hired, Chris, has brought this skill set from the county. He did this type of work at the county. And so he has the skill set and can train our guys. And so we just lack equipment at this point. I'm not saying that there isn't a need for more folks to do more stuff, but that is, we feel right now the biggest glaring need is in the engineering department, because I want Chris brings exceptional skills in streets and transportation, and you can see the benefit we're getting from this. And if I've got him doing other things, he's not getting this done.
And real quick, Beck, in the preliminary budget on page 92, you can clearly identify the capital equipment for the street program in fiscal year 21. And then on page 93, you can see the capital equipment in the street program for, excuse me, that's page 95 for 2022.
So Chris, are you going to get to the capital program here?
I think we're ready to transition to that. I think Noah's going to start us off with the financial picture on that, and I was going to take it from there.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to jump right in. So this is a representation of our current Capital 304 fund budget. Again, this is all the projects that we have identified early on in the budgeting process, the fiscal years in which they would be complete, as well as the funding sources below here. This was kind of a staff recommendation to the Transportation Committee. At the time, we had projects still out for grant review and acceptance, so we've got some more information back. And so now is our moment for the Transportation Committee to review this and determine whether this still remains the priorities for our 304 fund money. Again, this list came from our Transportation Improvement Plan, our 6-year TIP, where staff went through and identified the projects in which we could fund and the projects in which we had some grant applications pending. So I'm gonna go back to here real quick. Again, with these funds, they're for specific revenue sources from our McCormick Transportation Impact Fee funds, as well as our Transportation Impact Fee funds. And then 2 of the projects have federal grants and a match against the REIT, and another has a state grant against our fund balance. So this is where I wanted to open it up one more time before we can kind of finalize our proposal for the capital fund. Is there a different priority, or is this still the correct priorities for this fund? And with that, I'm going to kind of kick it back over to Chris. And I don't know if this helps you, Chris, or you want me to take this down if this is distracting.
I think that's good for now. In a second, I'll have Jackie bring up the matrix. But so I wanted to take us back to, we had a discussion on arterial corridors, and part of that discussion, we looked at all the different grant funding opportunities. And so I'd like us to be strategic in how we develop the progress of our projects through the years to position us to get that grant funding. And so I've got a couple recommended changes for consideration along those lines. So for starting out for Old Clifton, for the non-motorized improvements, I think we want to get in a position where we know through KRCC and the Surface Transportation Program, we're it's kind of the peanut butter effect within the county, and we're in line to get funding. So I think the best thing for us we want to deliver projects. So the best thing we can do is get a design done next year, and that positions us to be shovel ready when we apply in 2022 for the next round of grant funding.
And Chris, are you referring to 1.5A when you say Old Clifton? Is that the project you're referring to, or which project on the list are you referring to?
Correct.
Okay,
Well,
1.5A.
Henderson Hill Roundabout. So we're talking about, where is it on there?
I see a 1.4, 1.5A.
Oh, it says, okay, that says Fagley to Anderson Hill. Yeah, roadway improvements identified in McCormick Village. Transportation line. Yeah, that's correct. So that's the non-motorized improvements that we've been talking about.
So you're saying to take those later year dollars and accelerate those because they're dedicated dollars that we can't spend in other manners.
Yeah, and the nice thing about that is they're available. So let's move that up into 2021 and get going and get that project shovel ready.
So I want to pause right there, Chris, just so everyone can see the table. I don't know if they can at the top. Scott, I see you looking. At the top here, you have the fiscal years across of our tip. And we're looking at 1.5A. Originally, we had a 22 budget of $225,000 in the current preliminary budget, and we were obligating $225,000 to get that work going in to continue that work in 2023. What I hear Chris saying is to move both these dollars into 2021 to keep this project going forward. And the mayor then wanted to clarify that these dollars are also coming from our McCormick Transportation Impact Fee funds, which are a restricted source. So that would be appropriate.
Well, they're
Can't be
going to have to
spent
come. They have to
Right.
come from both the McCormick fees and the citywide fees, because the McCormick fees are capped. And I don't know that we've got a total of $2 million in McCormick fees to build non-motorized improvements and widen Old Clifton from Sunny Slope to Tremont. So we can't spend all of that just to design this middle section of road. But some of that certainly can be used for this.
Okay, so you're gonna need to get with Noah, Nick, and educate Noah on the dollar limitations. Because we can't overcommit one fund or the other.
Yeah, because when we built the preliminary budget, Nick, we allocated the full $225,000 from that McCormick Impact Fee Fund. So is it just the second 225 that creates an issue?
I have to go back and look at things, but the citywide impact fees also allocated money towards this project. So this project was funded from two sources.
Not in the budget. Old Clifton, 225,000 from McCormick Impact Fee, with the other 225 coming in 2023. If we're talking about 15A.
We are talking about 15A. I think that the ongoing negotiations have some bearing on how much we're going to be able to spend here, because half of the project that is in the development agreement is in the county and half of it is in the city. So I don't think that $450,000 is outside of what is reasonable to spend on design, but it is probably near the upper limit of what can be spent of McCormick Impact Fee money on this project. Everything else would have to come from other sources.
So when we get to construction and we have to fund the match, that may have to come from transportation impact fees and general ones and not specific ones.
Right, unless we amend the development agreement so that this project cost is adjusted and we separate the city portion of the project from the county portion.
Okay.
So, but I support what you're proposing. I think that it's a reasonable thing to do. I just, the exact dollar amounts and how much we can spend, we need to sort of vet that, I think, with the, probably with McCormick Communities.
Well,
Okay.
actually, it needs to be done by you and Noah tomorrow. We need that page from that agreement. I've seen it before. I know you've got it someplace, Nick.
Yeah, it's in
There's a
the
page. There's a page
2005
behind it.
agreement.
Yeah. Why don't you send it to Noah and I, that one page.
All right, we got some homework to do there. My other recommendation is that we continue working on Bethel. We're looking, if you look at the grant strategy we've put together, we're hoping to be able to apply for a number of different types of money, but some of that is the TIB programs, the Urban Arterial Program, the Urban Sidewalk Program, which we continue to do every year. And so the sooner we can, and for those programs, they like to complete projects. They don't like to fund planning and design as on projects as much. So if we can get even a 30% done, that helps our case, because at that point we'll have some permits in hand that check off progress that you get points for on the application. So I think our past level of thinking on this was it was all or nothing, and it's really expensive, and it's almost $1 million to design it. But I think the reality is, if we can get enough funding just to get to 30%, we improve our competitiveness for the grant programs that we're targeting. So I'm proposing that we move up those dollars as well into 2021 to the extent that we have them. And then what would we need to sacrifice to do that would be the work on the proposed work on Sydney Avenue, the design, Sydney Avenue Southwest. And I think that, you know, this is just my opinion, but I think that following the Ruby Creek study, we've provided adequate direction to information to shape the development for the private development that goes on there. So in my way of thinking, I think we hold off. We don't want to go first. I think we want to let some of that private development take shape there in accordance with our planning. And then towards the end of it, you know, we could look to complete a corridor. TIB has a program where you can actually use, if we have a developer that's doing some frontage improvements, we can get credit for some of that for our local match. So towards the tail end of the street improvements that are done there, I think that's the better time. And that's probably, you know, that may not even be within the 6-year window that we'd be looking at doing a project there. The other aspect was the utilities, and I think we got a ton of room in the street for future force mains or whatever's needed there. We have a very wide right-of-way through there. I think the bigger question might be along the lines of where the actual lift stations have to go, and that's more of a utility funded thing than a transportation funded thing. Looking at it from my jealous guarding of the transportation dollars here. So I think that we could, I think our money, you know, we're better spent, our resources are better spent on Bethel, just to get us further along with that and improve our chances of bringing in other people's money. So Jackie, could you pull up the matrix?
So this is the first I've heard about postponing the Sydney project, but remember that Kitsap Transit just selected that Sydney site as the park and ride facility. And so my thinking was that, and that was part of the reason I was looking for that in the budget before this meeting, is I think there's going to be a synergy between that and that Kitsap Transit trying to move forward with that site and us coming up with designs for Sydney Road there. But again, this is the first time I'm hearing this, so I need to think about it a little bit more.
I think you're right. Transit is going to move forward in that site, and probably, but based on what Jay and I heard yesterday at our transit briefing on the budget, it's sooner versus later. But I think we've got enough in the concepts that we'll get our frontage improvements that we're desiring there. I like the approach Chris is. I like versus having a whole bunch of design, low-level designs. I think we should focus on a project or two that we try to get to the finish line and build something.
Yeah, the other active aspect of Sydney is, Kitsap Transit's eligible for dollars we can't compete for. So, hopefully they'll bring in grant funding to do some of those streets improvements, and then we can focus the things we can get in other areas of the city. And so here's kind of this was the grant matrix that we had from back when we had the arterial corridors discussion. And I've gone ahead and just highlighted in green kind of the case for those two projects here. And you can see that, like I said, I was trying to, with Bethel, I'm trying to get to the I don't know if the build program's on the cards, but we'll find out more. But the urban arterial program and the complete streets program, I think are things we'll be competitive for in the future. And again, those opportunities come up every year. So the quicker we can be, in a situation where we score greater points, the better.
Are those federal dollars, Chris?
That's state dollars.
State dollars.
And then, again, on the old Clifton non-motorized, we're looking to compete. We know we have a good chance. We're going to get something out of the service transportation program, and I think that's going to be a hard one for us to fund with other programs. So I think that's a good one for us to design in 2021 and procure the grant funding in 2022, and then construct hopefully in 2023. Trying to get just a few projects here that we can complete.
What did you say, 20? What were those dates you just mentioned?
So we're trying to move some dollars up so we get to 30% design in 2021 next year.
For Bethel.
Then the competition is in early 2022. And then presumably we could be ready to construct in 2023.
For which project?
for the non-motorized improvements on Old Clifton.
Okay, the STP funding, the countywide money, the federal money that comes through KRCC, that will be, that we will submit an application for in 2022 are for funds for, I think it's 25, 26. Because you have to state an obligation date.
That's right. There's a little bit of delay there. Mark, do you recall the details on that? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I haven't seen an updated scenario yet, but if I follow suit with the funding cycle in the year's program, Beck is correct.
Okay. All right. Well, I was a little hopeful we could move it forward faster than that, but that's what it'll be. But we're pretty assured we're gonna, if we design that project and that's our STP program project, we're pretty sure we can move forward on that schedule and get those funds. And then I've got this little table on the right, just kind of summarizing where the dollars get programmed in the years 2021 and 2022 for the projects we're talking about here. Down the lower right of the page there.
Scott or Jay, do you guys have anything to say about this part of the discussion?
No, I'm good.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Chris, that UAP funding and the Complete Streets funding, where do those come from?
Those are state TIB programs.
Okay, so Rob, I want you to listen to this. TIB, the Transportation Improvement Board, has not received additional source of revenue. They get 3 cents out of the gas tax, okay? And they haven't, that has not been increased since sometime in the 90s, early 2000s. And this year, they are not offering any of their sidewalk projects. So when you sent out that our legislative priorities, I think we need to include that just some discussion on local dollars too. The gas tax we received, the city and county gas tax we received has not been increased since 2005. And if the legislature is going to come up with a transportation package and look at new revenue sources, I think we need to support having additional revenue come to our local communities as well as TIB and CRAB.
Yeah, Josh and I had a conversation about that today, and he doesn't think that there'll be a transportation package.
Well, regardless, I mean, I think that we need to support that, because what I've read about TIB is they normally do 4 programs a year and they're down to 2 programs this year because their gas tax revenue has decreased so much.
Yeah.
So we want to be mindful of that also.
Yeah, and I'm willing to add it. It's just, Josh.
I don't know. We just need to be aware of it, and we need to be supportive if they, if they need something to be supportive of, we need to be supportive of that.
Yeah, happy to add it to the list, but Josh didn't think transportation funding was going to be.
It may not go anywhere, but it's just, that's just for us to be aware.
Yep. So I think what we were looking for here is a recommendation. Chris was asking us to shift some priorities to, to get some things shovel ready so we can be more competitive for the grants, and whether or not this committee was comfortable with the shifting in priorities. And he talked to Noah and I about this earlier today.
Can I ask a question? So I know we're pushing the Sydney Road Southwest project out, but I don't see where it's being pushed to on this list.
Probably where Bethel was. I don't know this Chris has gotten that far yet.
So on the list here, it's up here at Sedgwick and Sydney Road and Sydney Road widening.
So that like 2020.
25.
All right.
You know, this is probably one of those times when, we're relying on staff to give us the information that, what could be and how could we move things faster with obviously limited resources, both financially and staffing wise. I don't see anything that, right in my wheelhouse that, upsets me or anything. It's a great presentation. I liked what the discussion's been, and I would support moving this forward.
Go
I'll
ahead,
say
Scott.
that staff is best positioned to understand the funding sources and what makes us better prepared to get additional funding and how to juggle these. So I support what we've been hearing so far.
I think that, remember when we committed to the Tremont project all in with the funding we received plus the bond measures, we knew at that time that that was going to be a heavy lift for the city as a whole, the Public Works Department specifically, and then it would, for quite a few years after the actual completion of the project, we knew that it was going to hamstring us to a certain degree, but we had no choice. I think that this particular plan, given that we've just now are wrapping up Tremont, a much brighter picture than what Alan Martin would have projected, back when he was here. I think we're making a lot of strides, and we're moving out of that severe limitation faster than we thought. We're recovering better. So I think this is a good plan.
What my comments on it is, again, I agree with what Jay said, is I don't know that the committee members are in a position to know what projects meet what funding criteria and how to do all of that. But I also heard Nick say that moving Sydney Southwest out was the first time he'd heard about that. So I personally would support the dollars and whatever all of the department heads come together with, so that that's a collaborative effort between the work Nick's been doing and what Chris and Mark have been doing. I don't know that council has any great insights to that.
I'm sitting here thinking about what's been said, and I certainly understand the scoring issue and going after the projects that score well, but I think you also have to be cognizant of where the development pressure is, and that us having designs and a coordinated plan for that Ruby Creek area is really important to make sure that that is cohesive. I also think that there's the piece, Stetson Heights is bringing a pedestrian pathway into that Ruby Creek neighborhood. And this project also completes connecting to school. I think potentially there's if Kitsap Transit is going for grants, if the city is doing a project or is partnering in that project, I think they potentially score better. I'm not sure how in this plan the traffic impact fee revenue is being used, but I believe that in the mid-year review, we're going to see what has developed and what traffic impact fee has come in. And I wouldn't want to push that project out 5 years, considering the development pressure and the potential synergy with Kitsap Transit. So I would suggest that Sydney Road Southwest project, which we should label that as Sydney Road Southwest. And I think we should do a mid-year review on that rather than kicking it out 5 years.
Probably not a bad idea.
I guess, so Rob, just a question. I know that Kitsap Transit got funding to do this site alternative study. They don't have any funding yet to move forward with the project itself, right?
I'll talk to you offline.
Okay.
That it's going to move faster than it's a priority for them. They found funding to wrap up Silverdale, and we're next in the crosshairs
Oh,
I
wow.
think,
Well, I think to answer these concerns of Nick's, I think knowing that piece of the puzzle helps us make that decision.
yeah, I think Nick brings a valid point. If the development, we're programming dollars in hand. And if we see the tremendous growth that we get, Stetson Heights gets out of its own way and really gets to market, and other projects really do happen next year, the mid-year review is probably an excellent opportunity to reevaluate this Sydney Southwest and plug it in, because then we'll have dollars. Noah and I get nervous when we start committing and making commitments based on projected dollars versus actual dollars in hand.
And I would just point out that, I've got it out there in green in 2025, but it actually still resides in the tip in the year that it was programmed. So until we change the tip, that's not changing. So that presumably would come up at the mid-year point when we discuss budget next year. It's like, well, have we funded this one yet? And where's the funding for it?
So did what I hear is, Chris, is that you would recommend doing the 30% design on Bethel in 2021 so that we were ready for competition in 2022? And that the Sydney Southwest would be looked at the mid-year review, and then to see if we could bring that forward in 2022. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I believe that, yeah, that's correct. And we have, hopefully, it won't be just the urban arterials program on the plate in 2022, but also the Complete Streets program.
Yeah.
And Beck, the third piece of this was moving forward on the project out there, the non-motorized project out on Old Clifton, provided we have to reconcile the limitations we have in the development agreement, that we're not overcommitting the dollars that we have. But if we're not, then that project, because those are dollars that can only be spent in that area. They can't be spent citywide.
Okay.
There's one more thing that's going to be out there is we'll know just before Thanksgiving if we receive our Anderson TIB. If we were to get that funding, the chances of getting any TIB money after this, at least in the next few cycles, will reduce.
And that's for the roundabout itself, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we're feeling pretty good about our chances of getting awarded that 1.6 million.
I got to bug out of here, guys. I got to get back down to City Hall so I can do the council meeting. So I'll look forward to hearing what the Transportation Committee reports out on this, at least the last bit of this.
Hey, Jackie, can I share my screen real quick just to confirm the discussion in a table? That way I have clear direction coming out of this meeting.
I got a quick question for you, Noah.
Shoot.
If down the road, when we finally take a look at increasing our impact fees, would that have a significant difference down the road, or would that just be minor additional funding to these projects?
I think Nick would also want to weigh in on this, but I think increasing, well, I guess it depends on how this all plays out. But the additional revenue would have a significant impact on our ability to fund our TIP in a general sense.
Yeah, I think that that mid-year review for the 2022 spending period, if we're able to get that amended in the early part of 2021 or later this year, that almost certainly provides the revenue that is needed to design that Sydney Road Southwest project and potentially other projects, or if we have a match for the Anderson Hill Roundabout. I would expect a few $100,000 in revenue in 2021 as a result of increasing those fees.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're waiting on the agreement, but the agreement affects all the properties within the city. And that's what I was just wondering. Thanks.
So I believe what I've captured the table, and speak up if I didn't get it correct, because it's my one chance with you guys before we kind of talk again in November. What I heard was the top table here is what we have in the budget and what we have planned so far in the preliminary budget. We did not change the first item, so I'm going to keep that. The second item, we added 1.3, tip 1.3 for the Bethel Sedgwick Corridor design phase. And I believe Chris had an amount of $500,000 total. We kept the 1.5A of Old Clifton, although we did expedite it to 2021 at the $450,000, which was in the tip. And I have an asterisk here that staff is going to review and confirm any constraints of this funds, and we might need to adjust because right now I have this plan to come strictly from the McCormick Transportation Impact Fee funds. And if that is not the case, then I think we should really regroup to ensure that we're using the proper source for the right reasons. And then the last is the bed 1.8 Bay Street PED path situational study. Again, with this project, we have grant funding and a local match. So is that consistent with what everybody else believes this conversation has ended on for the moment? Oh, and then I'll add it, we'll review the Sydney Road Southwest Design Project mid-biennium based on transportation impact fee revenue that has come in the current year.
Yeah, and
Go
on
ahead.
that mid-year review, Noah, do you just want to shift the whole 500,000 to 2022, or is it a 2022, 2023?
We could do that. That's fine.
Just for all of our folks on the committee, I think we need to help differentiate that the old Clifton Road design is separate from the Anderson Hill roundabout, because people tend to think of the old Clifton as being partly the roundabout.
But you're talking, that's from the roundabout down to Figley, isn't it?
No, roundabout at on Old Clifton at Anderson Hill. I think that's the 1.5.
Right, but when it talks about that old Clifton design, isn't that from the roundabout to Figley?
Yes,
Correct. Yeah.
I'm just trying to say is some people think it's the roundabout at Anderson, and we need to make sure that they
Yeah,
understand
no.
the project.
So I'm not hearing any disagreements on the table and the projects. Is there anything else to add, staff or committee members? Again, I want to make sure I captured everything so we can continue to move this forward in the budget.
Looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is all money outside of the preservation dollars.
Correct. Yeah.
Maintenance.
So if we go back to this again, the first item, we have federal funds, a federal grant with 143,000 from REAP 1. The old Clifton, again, subject to staff reviewing. We have currently all McCormick Transportation Impact Fee. The Bay Pedestrian Pathway is a grant and $77,000 of local match from, we're going to use fund balance from Fund 304. Sydney, we moved. That would have been city transportation impact fee. And instead we have brought in the Bethel 1.3, and we're going to use the city transportation impact fee. So swap the revenue source, just swap the projects.
Right, okay.
And then on the preservation plan, we have the $935,000 that the transportation committee is recommending be implemented into the budget.
And my understanding from the committee, and Jay and Scott, please help me if I've got it wrong, but the committee is comfortable with the funds, with the money piece of it, and that we are relying on staff for the actual projects.
Concur.
Funds and scheduling.
Okay, perfect.
Chair, I hate to ask, but is it possible to see if there's anything else to have a very short break between the next
Well,
meeting?
I was thinking that we have this projected growth presentation. Is that yours, Nick?
If it is, I wasn't aware it was on the agenda, but let's kick that to the next meeting and I'll give you an update.
Right, so,
We moved that one. Anyway,
Chris, do you have anything more for us?
I think we got through the agenda there other than the projected growth and we weren't sure we would get to that anyway, so. You can see what we have down for November on the agenda there. I don't know if there's anything to add, but you can certainly send me an email if people have thoughts on that.
Okay, I'm fine. And I too would like just a little break if we could have it between now and the council meeting. Scott, Jay, do you have anything more?
I do not. Thank you, guys. Good work. Good
Yeah.
dance.
Appreciate everything staff is doing.
Yeah, I'm sorry I have so many questions, but we kind of have to learn this as we go along. This is a new committee and we're just, a lot of education needs to happen. So thank you for your patience, Chris.
Thank you for your guidance, guys.
So are you actually adjourning the meeting? Should I turn the recording off now?
Yeah, we are going to adjourn and we'll see everybody at 6:30.